Well, we'll wait just a minute. I think we've got some more people signing in and coming in, and then we'll get started, okay?
Kind of pull it around. I don't want to bump you. Yeah. Right there.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. How is everyone today? Awesome, awesome. Thank y'all so much for being here. We are so excited to bring this speaker series to Central Texas College. We were awarded a $50,000 grant from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to expand our knowledge on retention and equity. And this was the brainchild of Dean Julie Starkey. She came up with the idea of doing this speaker series. I know I'm echoing, so I'll step a little bit away. The focus of this, like I said, is retention and equity. And we found that we've worked with Joe Carroll before at the Texas Success Center. And I've known Joe Carroll for years and years and years off and on. Our paths have crossed. But we were so excited that she accepted the opportunity to come speak to us and bring some additional knowledge about student success and persistence, as well as equity, to you, the faculty, to the leadership of Central Texas College, as well as to the student success team and student services teams that all fall under me. So those are the 3 different sessions. But I want to get us going. We have a busy, busy morning. And so let me read to you a little bit about Jo Carroll Fabianke. Dr. Jo Carroll Fabianke served as the Vice Chancellor for Academic Success for Alamo Colleges from 2012 through 2017, working with the 5 colleges in the district on academic initiatives focused on increasing student success. Her leadership roles included building collaboration among the faculty across the colleges since the district joined Achieving the Dream in the first cohort of 2004, and serving as a lead for the AAC initiatives with colleges across the country. She served as a coach for AACC Pathways 2.0 and works with the Texas Success Center and Texas Pathways program. She also serves as a coach for IEC's Caring Campus work with colleges across the country. We always joke that people like her failed at retirement, right? Her initial assignment with the Alamo Colleges was professor at San Antonio College, where she taught for 24 years and received the Texas Excellence Award before advancing her career to leadership roles, including serving as the first director of institutional effectiveness, co-director of the reaffirmation of accreditation and district policy liaison. She was the first vice president of academics at Northwest Vista College. Through these roles, Dr. Fabianke demonstrated her ability to work with disparate groups through clarification of options, resolving issues, and understanding the needs of various stakeholders. She brings a wealth of information from all different aspects of community college leadership and teaching, and we are just so happy and excited to have her here to speak with you today. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Fabianke.
Let's see how this works. Good morning, everybody. And she's recording this so it can be shared with others that are not in the room. So I'm going to try not to venture too far or turn my head too much. Now, let's see if that works. As long as I don't maybe get it too close. We have a couple of microphones because a little bit later, you may need to turn those off. A little bit later, well, in fact, a couple of times, I'm going to ask you to do some talking with each other at your table, and then we may do a little sharing. So I first want to start by thank you. I totally appreciate you taking this hour and a half to spend with me. I know it's Thursday of the week that faculty come back, so now you only have half a day today, and you don't want to be here all day tomorrow, right?
Right.
No, I got it. Before students come next week. But let me tell you, this is going to be a little different today than other speakers that you may have had. What we're going to talk about today is positivity. Hey, isn't that cool? All right, we're going to talk about you sharing your connections and establishing connections with students. Ways to make your classes more student-centered, not to change your pedagogy, not to decrease any of what you have as expectations for your students, but just a little bit different way of perhaps dealing with them. You know, you're the primary contacts with students, and so what I'm going to share with you today and ask you to talk about some is based on social psychology education, and brain science research. And so the first thing I'd like for you to do, and I know you know each other, but if you would, just if you don't know everybody at your table, make sure you do. And then think of a student that you initially thought, because 2 or 3 weeks in, you got an idea how students are going to do. So what if there was a student that you initially thought wasn't going to be successful, and then they were? What happened to make that happen? Would you just talk among yourselves for a little bit and share that? And I'm going to ask for a couple of volunteers when we come back together. Okay? Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you had a little time to at least hear 2 or 3 stories? Is anybody willing to share? And I don't know if you're going to want them to go to a microphone. If they talk, we can see how that goes and you can tell us, okay? Anybody willing to share a good experience? Please. You might stand up, shout it.
All right, so my experience is, I've used her name because I'm very proud of her. Her name is Jasmine Ledesma. She started out in my office management course. She sat on the right side, very quiet, withdrawn, introvert. I called on her. She shied from answering. One day I pulled her aside and kind of encouraged her to come out and be part of that impact. Long story short, she ended up being my president of that impact. And then now she works for First National Bank and she's in a leadership position. Wow.
And I'm looking at you smile as you tell that story, so I know it did a lot for you too. One more. Anybody? Somebody willing to share? Please.
I got a student in the spring semester last year who's on the first day of class, she came up and told me her baby had died 2 weeks ago. And she was wondering if she was going to be able to make it through. So she was a blubbering mess in front of me. I was practically crying along with her. And I told her, like, this, you know, if you don't need to do it, you don't have to stick around. There are other semesters. So I checked on her frequently, tried to. She made some friends in the class, and I think they kind of pushed her along. And at the end of the class, she said, "I really appreciate the fact that she stayed with me and so talked to me." She said that there weren't a lot of people that checked up on her, and so she was really happy that I did that. So I don't really take any credit for her success. But she really did. I think maybe just stay with her and checking on her, and, talking to her when she needed a shoulder.
You know, I think we don't know everything that our students face. And so the very things that you talked about, you kind of stayed with her. Not in her face, but you were there for her. She knew, and she met other students in the class that helped her. And so she might not have come up to you at the end, but it was nice that she did, so you know. A quote I read says, "How we interpret challenges affects our motivation to remain engaged with them." Now, your student told you her challenge, but a lot don't. But think about a challenge that you faced. Maybe you decided you were going to run a marathon and you had no idea what that was going to take when you started. Maybe you were in graduate school and you thought, "I'm not going to be able to do this class that only lasts 3 weeks and get everything done." But amazingly, we find that we can do a lot of things when we put our mind to it. So I'd like to begin my discussion with you about, I picked these things up on your website. You all are doing some great stuff, right? You know, I think, and I'm going to be honest with you, I talk to the colleges across Texas every 2 years doing some interviews about what they're doing in pathways. And I would say that Central Texas College is not recognized for what all you do. I mean, it is perceived, even within Texas, that you're the military college. And you are. But we forget that you're a comprehensive community college and you do really great things for the students. Now, I didn't realize that you were the top choice going as far away as Fredericksburg. So you all have a big expanse of territory that you cover. So I just want to acknowledge what all you're doing. Now, I told Les, he was the first person I met this morning, because he came up to meet me. Are y'all surprised about that? No. And the first thing he said to me is, "Where are you from?" So I'm originally from Rosebud. I don't know if you know where that is. It's on Highway 77, east of Temple, south of Waco a little bit. So I've heard about Killeen all my life. This is my first time to visit here. So I kind of understand this part of Texas and went to the Stagecoach Inn for a lot of celebrations. And, you know, I mean, I could go on and on, but I think I can relate to who you are here and who your students are. I know that you see data, but as we begin to talk about our students at Central Texas College, I'd like to just share a little bit of data. And I want us to put it in the context, not of necessarily success or not, but of who the students are. So, like a lot of colleges, almost 8 out of 10 of your students are part-time. You know that. You know that 28% are dual credit. Now, that's kind of a captive audience. They don't have much choice. They sign up for dual credit and they're there. In fact, sometimes you think it would be good if they could drop, because it's going to go on their college record for the rest of their lives, and they didn't know that, and neither did their parents. But anyway, for the most part, their success is much higher than the rest of your students. The ethnicity, which I thought was really interesting for you, because look how white, Hispanic, and African American, there's not that much difference in the numbers that you have. And I know you know that from your own classes. In San Antonio, the African American population is only about 8%. So it's much higher here. And so between those 3 groups that we typically talk about, yours are very similar, at least in numbers. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what some other differences are in a minute. 67% they say they're academic. Now, I'm surprised that's not a little bit higher here, because usually when you talk to students when they enroll, they all think they're going to transfer because that's what they took English and they took history and they did all that in high school, and so they think that's what they're going to do. So I'd say it's a credit to you all that you have as many students involved in the technical programs that declare that as there are, which says a lot for your technical programs and probably for the recruiting that you do in those areas. But you do have a good number who say they want to transfer. So the next thing, I told you I'm not going to let y'all just sit here. I'd like for you to take a couple of minutes and talk among the group. What are the differences between students in your classes? What do you know about that? And how do they affect your classroom environment? Do you think about it? Do you recognize it? And how do you approach any differences that you do with your students? 5 minutes. Let's see what happens.
Exactly.
We have so much information. It's like the United States
I hate to stop such good discussion. Okay, so Julie says if you're willing to share, you would be best if you went to a microphone. So, who would like to tell us something here? You know, I think you get started in the class on the first day, and you've got the syllabus, and you've got your curriculum, and you know you need to get going, and we don't always look around and really see who's in the class. So, yes, ma'am, would you share? Do you mind walking over to the microphone? I'm sorry.
Kathleen, I'll bring it to you if you want me to.
Hello.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we were in consensus on generational gap. And it's really interesting because they both have the same challenges, but at different times. We've noticed we have to level sometimes for the younger students because they did numerals in school. Sometimes we have to level work, and we have older generation people that have no clue how to even work a mouse. And then you've got the complaints between the two on their study habits and their work habits and behavior in the classroom. So you have to kind of adjust and deliver your content in several different ways.
Great example. Somebody else. We didn't even have that one up there. Oh, these days, you've got a lot of students that are well past high school age. And I'm going to say, even those that come to you directly out of high school, they came from different high schools. And we looked at all of those towns that have students that come to you, and I'm going to guess, even though the curriculum in Texas is supposed to be the same, the way they're taught and the rigor, I mean, it's all different. And we expect them between the 1st of June and the 3rd week in August to become college students. And they've only been on the beach during the summer trying to earn a little money. So, somebody else, anybody want to share something that you've noticed in your class about differences?
I'll share something.
Sure, good.
I've noticed, like in my coaching class, my tone voice isn't
Oh, right. Okay, so in my coaching class, I have retired soldiers and I have kids who just came out of high school. And their ideas of how they think they're going to coach is totally different. Because, you know, a retired military guy or girl, they have been leading soldiers and feel like they can lead a certain way that's probably not going to be acceptable and not going to allow them to have a job very long if they do that in the public school. So it's interesting. And you know, kids, a lot of kids nowadays feel like they can't be taught to a certain way or whatever. So they definitely have a different idea of how they're going to present their coaching styles and philosophies to their kids. So it's an interesting thing.
And at San Antonio and the Alamo colleges, there are a lot of military families. And so we find that students come and they tell, a lot of them, tell their teachers, they were more afraid, whatever afraid means, to come and register for college than they were to be in the military. Because it's so different. They don't know what that's going to be like, you know? So your example is just perfect. There's just the whole gamut of how expectations are of what it's going to be like to be in the classroom. One more? Anybody? Good examples. Good examples. One more? Anybody? Okay, we'll move on then. We're going to have another opportunity to talk, so I'm not done. All right, so I'd like to spend a couple of slides talking about the results here. And I know you see them, but I'd like for you to sort of talk about them in the context of what happens in your classroom. So you can see here that the number of students that earn 6 hours or more in the first term. And look at the difference between full-time and part-time, and remember that 80% of your students are part-time. If I'm part-time and I've gotten in here and I've managed to sign up for 2 or 3 classes, now across Texas the average is about 9 hours. I'm guessing it's somewhere around that here for a part-time student. It's probably 2 or 3 classes. If I don't pass at least a couple of classes, what is my motivation to enroll the next term? The number, look at the percentage of students that have persisted from the first to the second term. And again, look at the difference between full-time and part-time. Now, I know after the first semester, a lot of full-time students become part-time students. But, you know, we could go into a deep analysis of this, but we're going to get the gist of this here by looking at these numbers. So if 80% of your students are part-time and 53% earn 6 hours and 43% come back a second term, you're losing a lot of students. A lot of students. Now, life creates a lot of that. However, remember that deal about motivation? If we can hook them in their first semester, they're more likely to come back in the second. And we're going to talk about some ways to do that. I would also share with you, remember we said you have about the same percentage of the 3 groups, white, Hispanic, African American. Well, I didn't put all these numbers up here because you would glaze over and say, I'm not listening to any more of that. But let's just take African American as an example. I think it was 28 or 29% of your enrollment is African American. In that case, 6 hours or more, 51% earn 6 hours, where it's almost 65 for white and Hispanic. That means 1.5 more students that are white earn 6 hours. Now, when you start talking about the number of students, it's kind of a different way of looking at this. Persisted first term to the second, those African American 54%, and white and Hispanic is 53 and 55. So they've got the grit to come if they manage to get 6 hours. Although look at the number that don't come back after the first term. Now, I had the nerve and the gumption to come and enroll the first semester, and then I don't come back the second, you're likely not to get them back, is what the research says. So we need to do everything we can to hold on to those students. It cost, I looked up, and I hope I have this right, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I looked on your website, and to take 6 hours costs $570. And you may say, well, they're going to get financial aid to cover that. Well, they've covered 6 hours of their eligibility for financial aid. And so if they don't pass them, financial aid doesn't say, okay, it doesn't count. They still have used up 6 hours. If they are out of district, which I take to mean out of Texas. Okay, and what is that? The county or the? Okay, so if they're out of the taxing district, just for that 6 hours, it's $715. And if they are a non-resident or international, it's almost $1,500 to take that 6 hours. So they've invested some money, and we would like for them to have a return. Now, I'm not saying they're not responsible for this. Please don't misunderstand me. They are. Now, if I earned 15 hours in the first year, and it's 15 because if it's supposed to be a 2-year degree, and I would need 15 hours and 4 long terms to get 60. That's why it's this. For financial aid, 12 hours is considered full-time. But we're using 15, and you can see in the first year, only 39% of your students earn 15 hours. If I don't earn 6 or 9 or 12 hours, it's going to take me a long time to get that degree. And a lot of things can happen, to discourage me in that length of time. If I earn 30 hours in the first year of your full time, only 7.3% do that. Now that tells me that a lot of those students don't end up staying full time, right? So these are just some numbers for you to reflect on. So I'm going to move on. Another gauge are graduates. So again, we're using data that actually comes from the coordinating board. This is not made up. Numbers from the coordinating board. And so were measured in the state, actually across the country, by how many students graduate in 3 years, in 4 years, and in 6 years. The first gauge, if it's a 2-year degree, they're giving them 150% of the time to get through that 2-year degree. So you can see here the difference between your graduates at full-time and part-time. Now, if I'm a 3-year graduate, I've taken on average 10 hours successfully in each of the long terms over those 3 hours. That's what it's going to take for me to be a 3-year graduate. Mathematicians, you can check me on this. If I'm a 4-year graduate, I've earned 7+ hours in each long term over 4 years. Well, that's sort of like, yeah, I'm moving in. But 6 years? My goodness. That means I've earned about 5 hours each long term over 6 years. Who's going to do that? Who's going to stick with that? You can see the number that do. Good for them. They are meeting a challenge. But we don't keep a lot of them. And I just showed you the state percentages for your own information. Now, a lot of your students are going to do what life has them do. But I'm going to say to you, I'm going to show you some things the literature shares, is that you have a great influence. A great influence on these numbers. Look at even those who earn the associate degree. So that's that, you can add them together. This is all of your graduates, both certificates and associate's degrees. But of those who earn the associate's degree, AAAS, that are enrolled in either another 2-year because it may be back here because they want a different skill, or they go to a 4-year, only 19%. Now, if I come here and say I'm going to be a transfer student, I'm really thinking about a bachelor's degree, right? So, and quite frankly, an AA or an AS in most of our discipline areas is not going to get me a job. It's going to take a bachelor's degree. And more as time goes by, jobs require at least a bachelor's degree. So, and so employed within a year after graduation are 22.5%. So you may say, well, they decided not to go on in school. They decided to take a job. Well, they didn't all do that either. So one of the things I think we need to think about is what do students do when they leave us? Because if they spent money and time taking courses here, we want them to do something more when they leave here. And you can see the transfer rate. Okay, I'm going to show you one more. And I picked this up off of information that I think Julie shared with me. So, Julie, if I've interpreted this incorrectly, you tell me. Because I think this is really interesting. This shows the breakdown of your enrollment. Now, this is over a full year. So, this is 2021. And it's not graduates. Well, it's graduates, but it's also enrollment. So, in state, you had 15,394 students enrolled. Now, it's not one-to-one, and I know that. I mean, those that are enrolled are not those that graduate. I get it. But this is just to give us kind of a flavor for what happens. So you can see how many degrees in 2021 were conferred and how many certificates. The Continental Campus, and you know the definition of that better than I do. You can see the enrollment, 2,826, and the number of degrees and certificates awarded. And I'm going to guess the enrollment, even of those who continue, whatever it is when they continue. And then we've got the Navy campus, and Distance learning is sort of all of those who was in distance learning. And then, but look at on the degree certificate side of in-state. Just to get an idea, I looked at what is the percentage of graduates to enrollment. And in-state, it would be 12.6%. 12.6%. For the continental campus, it's 26.4%, more than double. And I compared, and I hope this is okay, I took the Europe campus and the Navy campus and added them together. And then I took the OCONUS graduates, which is 270. And that's 17.4%. Now, you know better than I'm sure, that those that are in the continental campus probably are active military. They're kind of more focused. They know what they're doing. And that's great. But if your in-stay is the huge portion of your enrollment, and that's only 12.6%, we're losing a lot of opportunity here. Would you agree? I'm seeing a few people nodding their heads. How do we do something about that? Because I'm going to guess a lot of those students are probably in your classes. Or they may be online, but you do more of that, I'm going to guess, because you're here. So let's look at a little bit of thinking about this. Now that's not a really pretty chart because I did it myself. Because I couldn't find one to steal from somebody. Enrollment. You got students coming in Monday. You have students that are taking classes with you that took classes before, but for the most part, you don't have a lot of influence on enrollment. They decide they want to take you because they know you or they've heard about you, but enrollment overall is not really something that you have a lot of control. And at the top of this chart, completion. As I said to you, that's where we're measured, and that term-to-term enrollment. The whole state sees those things. Not you, because you don't get involved in that, but a lot of other people do. Where do you have the influence? It's in course retention and course success. If they don't stay with you the whole semester, they're not going to be successful. So it's important that you not lose a lot of students during the semester. And then success. And success is measured by ABC. Course retention is they got a grade, which takes me back to that dual credit. And, if people don't drop by census day, they're going to get something, even if it's an F. But success is ABC. So, and you have a big influence on term to term, because if they don't stay in your class, they're very likely not to stay. And if they're taking 2 or 3 classes, your class becomes even more important. So these are the leading and lagging indicators. And I would say, when you say, I see graduation numbers, but does that really matter to me? Well, maybe not, but it all leads one to another. And so what happens in your class significantly affects what happens to the student. As an example, let's talk about the starting points of your students. And you mentioned some of these earlier, and I appreciate you doing that. You can see there's a lot of diversity of today's students, more than ever before. The way students experience the world is very different depending on what their background is. and whether they've been out of school for a long time, as you mentioned back there, or they haven't been out of school for a long time. We tend to relate to those similar to us and hesitate to relate to others. So I'm sure you had people that come in your class, they sit on the back row, they never make eye contact and hope nobody will talk to them. And a lot of that is out of fear or because they are afraid to be engaged. There are deeply rooted cultural traditions that emphasize centrality of family. I experienced this as a faculty member in San Antonio with a lot of, many years ago, particularly Hispanic women. Hispanic women would come into the class and they wouldn't make eye contact. And I found over time, they were leaving their world to come and go to class because nobody else had gone to class. Nobody else had been in higher education. And yet, I wanted them to be a college student and talk and be confident and want to be successful. And then they'd have to go back into their family culture where nobody else did that. And so they kind of have to slide back into being what is familiar in their world. Doesn't have to be Hispanic, it can be any culture. We all read nowadays about the increase in student stress levels. You can blame it on COVID, you can blame it on a lot of things. It doesn't matter. There's increase in stress for all of us, right? I mean, you experience it too. But there is a lot of stress going on today. A lot are the first to attend college, so there's nobody at home to help them know how to navigate. There's a real food and housing insecurity. I'll bet there's some good percentage of chance that in all of your classes, you've got some homeless students. You may not know it, but they are. And they don't know where their next meal or their children's next meal is going to come from. And that can't help but affect what happens in the class. And many of them are either parents or caretakers. I was in an Uber a couple of weeks ago in California, and this woman was telling me the story that she has for years. She looked like she was probably about 40. She's lived with her father, who is schizophrenic and has all kinds of issues. And she has started at the community college 3 or 4 times and gets partway through the semester and something happens and she has to quit. And, she told me she had tried to talk to her instructors, blah, blah, who knows? Who knows what all that story is. But it just reminded me that we don't really know what's happening to our students. So what can we do? Now, I thought this was a great quote, and I'm going to show you a little bit the book that I got this from. This is a faculty member who was involved in a workshop like this, and then they continued on to have faculty groups that work together. And, I think this is exactly right. You all have master's degrees, most of you or all of you, in your discipline. Did you ever talk about how to teach? In your school? All right. Did you have a degree in education? Wow. Okay. Good for you. But for most, I would say, we don't talk about that. And so many of us haven't really had the opportunity to think deeply about what happens other than teaching our content. You're familiar with Vincent Tinto? This is a quote from him. He's really well known. Not today, but back in the 90s. I'll give you a second to read this. It's about the classroom. The classroom's important. The classroom is where, once classes start, they come on campus, go in your classroom, maybe take 2 in a row, maybe not, get back in their car and they leave. So their whole idea of college is with you. So, moving on. What strategies do you use to engage students in the classroom and relate your content to their lives? I'm only going to give you about 5 minutes, but I'd like for you to talk about this. Meanwhile, I want to bring some candy. While you're talking, if you're wondering about the flavors, Julie, on the side of the package, would you say what they are? Okay. The red is milk chocolate. The blue is dark chocolate. The yellow is white chocolate. The black is extra dark chocolate. And the orange is milk chocolate with caramel.
Dr. Kaplan? Of course.
Which
Yay.
one?
White chocolate.
I don't know which
I
color.
think it's yellow.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello. Already got one, but I'll take a second one. I already had 2. Oh.
You're sneaky.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking that when she said something. Yeah, there is. Yes, yes.
Couple of more minutes and we'll stop again.
My insurance. It's just fine.
We're on the downhill. I know it's 11:03. Please stay with me. I hope the candy will entice you to stay for just 25 more minutes. So, we're getting into the really good stuff. Who will share what is a strategy that you use to engage students? And by the way, when we get through with this, I'm going to share some from the literature. Yes, please. You've got a microphone coming, I think.
Hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get her and then you.
Okay, I'll be quick. So at our table, we said dad jokes, which I witnessed them, and yes, they are very engaging. Bad math jokes. So in the slide, we're like math, and then like just like a really bad math joke, but I think they're funny.
We need some relief in math. I get it.
So everybody comes in there so stressed, right? So I do motivational Mondays, so where I show a motivational video. So just little things where it breaks away from the curriculum to be like, hey guys, let's put a smile on our face, and talking to them before and after class, being personable and showing them that you care.
Absolutely. And it doesn't cost anything, and it doesn't take a lot of extra time. So who else? Oh, back over here. Yes, ma'am, please.
Hi, I'm actually on the same route that you're going on with our students, nursing students. First of all, we try to create an environment where they know when they come in, this is a safe environment. This is an environment where we encourage you and we want you to tell us about you. We want us to tell us about your cultures. You know, when this situation happens with you medically, what does your culture do? We want to invite that openness, that feeling of welcoming, valued. At the same time, I'm currently in my doctoral on nursing education. I'm in my last 3 chapters.
Congratulations.
So I have all of my data, and believe it or not, the things that students say they need to help them be successful in nursing school, I'm having a number down. Number 1, first of all, is creativity, believe it or not. But number 2, I found was odd because it was human. Instead of the level of education of your instructor, human was higher for them. And I'm finding that across all semesters 1 through 4, which I thought was the oddest thing. And so I'm one of those instructors that I like to use that wow factor. When I see that nothing else works, I use the wow factor. And I'm going to give you an example, and if my boss is here, I know she's here, don't fire me. As nurses, it's important that we teach our students how to not only protect the patient, but to protect themselves and even protecting their families by use of personal protective equipment, PPE. And we know that when COVID hit, it was very important to know how to put that PPE on and how to correctly take it off to protect all around you. Students had no problem learning the ways of putting the PPE on. They used the right sequence to put it on, but we teach them to critically think. And when you critically think, the sequence for removing it is not a normal critical thinking situation. It doesn't actually flow with the mind of how you should take it off. And so every time we get a test question dealing with that, the number that got it right was always very, very low. It just didn't exist. One semester I decided I'm going to blow their minds, and they're going to remember. They call it doffing or removing your PPE. I actually use a striptease sequence where we had the music and
They remember.
the PPE was taken off to a slightly striptease manner. The numbers for that test question.
We need a demonstration.
The numbers for that test question went up to like 99%. I blew their mind, and they all remember, and some of them have bachelor's degrees right there, and they still talk about that.
Thank you. That is a great story. A great story. And just a story. You'll remember that, won't you? A story is good. Got one more. Anybody?
That's a hard act to follow.
That is a hard act to follow. Oh, that's okay. What I wanted to do was for you to talk about this, and then I want to share some things that come from the literature. And we'll do this kind of quickly. If you create a relationship-rich environment, it'll go a long way, and both of our examples show that. So find ways to help students make connections between their college life and the rest of their lives. And it can be examples. It can be stories. Build an environment for all of your students like we do for our honor students. Here they are, honor students, and we probably treat them and give them more time than we do our regular students. How about athletes? Athletes get a lot of attention. And any military organizations you have here that involve students, you do a lot of stuff. So these groups feel like there is a community. We need to think about that and try to do it for all of our students in our classes. There is a lot of literature out there about mindsets. So you can help your students adopt a learning mindset, and you adopt it. That a student brings to college some assets to be developed rather than liabilities. that we've got to focus on. Accept responsibility for challenging and supporting students to learn. Now, there's nothing here about expectations. Nobody's asking you to decrease or water down your expectations of students. Not even considering that. But it's more about your behaviors with your students. Now, there are some relationship-rich principles that can also make a difference. You need to build trust and expectations with students and connection. You want to develop a community of learners. Give them opportunities to work together in class so they get to know each other a little bit. And unbeknownst to you, they may connect outside of college about what you're asking them to do. Create opportunities for your interactions with students, not just you in front of the classroom. Set high expectations, but let them know about them, and then establish a caring, supportive environment for them to reach those expectations. And I think this is really important. Create an environment for students to learn, to maybe make mistakes, and to pick themselves back up and try again. I'm going to guess that you want your leadership to allow you to try things in class, to try things with students. And if they don't work, they're just going to say, okay, well, do something a little different the next time. And that's really what we're talking about here for what you do with your students. One more. Establish expectations with students. Now, this is something really important, and there is all kinds of literature out there about this. You need to review your policies and make sure that they are student-centered. Starting with, think about, and we went through some of this, who are the students in your class? What kind of students do you have? And what are the demographics? What are the characteristics? How are you going to address those? Ensure that the policies you create, the vast majority at least of your students will be able to comply with them. You know, don't set expectations that they really got to raise the bar beyond what is normally to be expected. In that literature, I've given you a reference to a site where there are some really good questions about reviewing your syllabus. You know, we do the syllabus from our point of view. So if you really look at the syllabus from your student's point of view and incorporate messages in there that promote student success and well-being. Now, we go through phases where we say reduce the student syllabus to 2 pages because they're not going to read, blah, blah, blah. Then, on the other hand, there are people who have 20-page syllabi. Well, what I would suggest and what this literature suggests is put the information in there that you want students to know and spend time at the beginning of the class making sure you emphasize it. And then you can always refer back to it. But you want the message to be good. Oops, I went ahead. Sorry. And then here's a good suggestion. You might send each student a personalized note at least twice in the semester. Maybe with their performance to date, strategies that you can throw out that might help them to learn depending on your discipline, and even the availability of you to talk with them. Now, this can be something you set up on the computer that you're not doing them individually. You do a template and then you just plug in, and that's really not that difficult to do. Well, here is an example of a college that really spent a lot of time on this kind of stuff, And they decided they were going to start what they called a faculty project for student persistence. And they were going to have 4 things that they were going to encourage each other to do during the beginning of the term. The first was learn students' names. Now that's really important, and I'll bet most of you do that, but if you don't, it would be a really good thing to do. And if you've got large classes, have them put up a tent with their name on it so you can use their name. We all like our name. You've got your name tag. Don't you like for somebody to remember it when you've met them not very long ago? It's really important. Return an assignment with formative, success-oriented feedback early in the term. Not just the grade, but this is great, or this is a good start, or however, or whatever you think is appropriate. Articulate those high standards, but also send a clear message on an ongoing basis that students who struggle are not doomed. Remember that challenge quote early? Because opportunities do exist for academic support, either you or other resources on the campus. If you don't know the resources that are available, at least know who to call to find out the resources that are available. And then, and we get a lot of feedback about this one, you can manage to meet one-on-one with students. Remember up at the beginning of our discussion, and we talked about at the beginning of the term, who's likely to be successful and who might not. So you start with those that are evidencing that they might not be successful. Stop them as they come into class, or stop them as they're leaving, or use your office hours to ask students to come by. If you had, let's say you've got 5 classes and there's 25 in each class. I don't know your class sizes, but there can't be a lot off of that. So if you had 5 classes with 25 students, and you talk to each one of them for 10 minutes, one-on-one, that's 12 and a half hours. Now that sounds like a lot, but I'll bet you are asked to have some office hours, maybe 10. So for a whole semester, it wouldn't be too difficult to spend a few minutes starting with those that need you the most. Online, and I know you still, boy, that must have been a nightmare. Fortunately, I was retired. That spring break that we had to shut down, and I can't imagine what it was like for you and your students. Probably a lot of you had never taught online, and you got a lot of students who've never been online, and you try. But hopefully we've kind of gone back to where that's not the majority of what you do. But they need some contact with you even more than those that come on campus. So if you at the beginning of the term, again, you can create a template, send a letter, send an email to your online students. Tell them a little bit about you. So it's not that you're just out there, but that they can know and imagine, put your picture up on the side, anything that connects those students with you. And articulate your expectations of them, but affirm confidence that if they put in some effort and use the resources that are available, they're going to be able to be successful. And then every time you communicate with them, and do it more than just that once, reinforce that. And really the message is, this college is not going to get the best of you. You're going to be able to be successful. That's really often all that it takes. Don't you like to have that positive reinforcement? Of course you do. Now, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes for this. And I would like for you, again, this is our last time, we're almost done, reflecting on everything that we've sort of talked about today. Here are some things. Why are students in your class? Well, The same reason why you sent your children to college. You want them to get skills and be able to move forward and have a good job and have insurance when they can't have it with you anymore. And so your students are the same. They just want a better quality of life. How can you relate your course to the other courses that are in the program? They only have to take 2 history. Many of them only have to take 1 math. You know, how is that going to relate to what it is that they want to do? Remember, we talked about, I need to see what I'm doing here, how it relates to what I plan to do with my life. How can you engage students with interacting with each other? How can you convey your expectations and support students in their learning? How can you create a relationship-rich environment? But the main question I'd like for you to spend 5 minutes on, is there one thing that you've thought of this morning? Just one thing that you can incorporate in your classes beginning next week that you think is going to enrich the process of helping students. 5 minutes, talk with each other. Guys, before we leave, we won't probably have time to report out, would you take one of the pieces of paper on the table and write some of the ideas you have about what you might incorporate this next week? Just do it real briefly, and we'll leave those for Julie to look at. You don't have to put your name on it. We're not going to check on it.
Yes.
please do write on the papers. We really appreciate that.
I want to respect your time, and I have 11:27, so I'm going to stop. But please write down a couple of ideas from your table, and we will give these to Julie, and they'll be shared with you because somebody may have thought of something, even in your discipline, that you may not have thought of. So we want to share your wise thinking as we leave here. This is me. Feel free to contact me if you have any thoughts about anything we've talked about today or any questions. And here are some resources. So very quickly, those of you that might say, boy, I wish I had more. This little book called Relationship Rich Education, it's fairly brief. It's got some great ideas in it. It's got both community college examples as well as university examples. The syllabus review and college policy reviews are in that students' experience project set, the next to the bottom one. So you might just go out and do a little Google and find that, and you'll find some questions that may just pique your thinking about some of this. I want to thank you for being such a great group to spend this hour and a half, and you talk to each other, and I hope you got some things kind of percolating up here that might help you to do some additional things to help your students. So thank you for your time. So you'll know, I'll be back in a couple of weeks or 3. And I'm going to talk to the leadership of Central Texas College, basically around the same things and how they can support. At the end of the month, then, of September, I'll be back a 3rd time. You don't have to come. But it'll be for the student services, the support people. And we're going to have the same discussion. Now, just think, if everybody at Central Texas College was sort of kept on the forefront of their thinking, how to engage students and make them feel really comfortable, what a difference it makes. Thank you. Have a good beginning of your semester.
Thank you so much, Nicole. We appreciate this. I don't know about you guys, but I started thinking about stuff that I could do in my classroom. And one of the things that kind of clicked with me is relating what I teach and what's in the learning objectives of the class to what they want to do and their other programs and things like that. So I'm going to really work on that. But if you guys could do anything to just help move that needle a little bit, anything at all, move the needle on retaining our students and helping them to achieve their goals, that is what the purpose of this was. I don't know if this is coming through. But so thank you for being here. And please, once again, thank Joe Carroll for the wonderful presentation.